Welcome to this presentation on the evaluation of the Inclusivity Action Plan for the York region, presented by Team America, represented by Guillermo Pro, hailing from Texas, call sign GP, Jesse Stewart, call sign former Action guy, and Charles Steele. He doesn't need a call sign with a name like that. We present this presentation to you guys. Agenda, you can read over that briefly. I'm going to highlight task conditions and standards, and comments, questions, and everything in between. Task condition standards for this. Expectations to help ensure no one falls asleep. Task, deliver evaluation on the Inclusivity Action Plan for the York region. Conditions, given 3 highly motivated Team Americans in a pre-recorded presentation to ensure seamless delivery over Zoom. Standards, in 5 to 8 minutes, but no more than 8. Provide general overview to future leaders on program evaluation.
Good evening. Our group decided to review the Inclusivity Action Plan, the report of the review of the Inclusivity Action Plan for the York region. Now, before we go into it, there's some limitations that come with this report. The first one is the fact that the Inclusivity Action Plan never had a provision for it to be reviewed. Therefore, there were no existing benchmarks for them to look at. In addition, there had been no incremental data collection, so they weren't able to go and follow the incremental changes in how things were affecting the overall. And then finally, I'm going to point out that the program fails to specifically mention what specific steps the Human Services Planning Coalition, who were the people behind the Inclusivity Action Plan, what steps they had actually taken to implement the desired changes. The report is listed below on this page if anyone wants to read the report itself. The IAP actually broke their research questions into 4 areas. The questions themselves were drawn from a review of documents that were mainly relating to public meetings about the IAP itself. Now, in the first section, we have to what extent are the goals and mandates of the IAP still relevant? And then, are the IAP's models and components well defined? Now, within these sections, there's a strength in the way the questioning was done and that it's easy to tabulate. The weakness is that there was no real objective data on the actual community needs and how it actually fits the community needs, just how the organizers of the small organizations that interacted with it felt it supported them. And remember, of course, there were no initial preset measurables. Now, most of the respondents did feel there was good communication, that they understood the objectives, and most people did feel that the program.
Evaluation design is a critical planning tool and structure, I argue foundation to ensure a program is properly resourced and synchronized. It is perhaps one of the most important steps in program evaluation. Pencil whip this step. Yes, that is a doctrinal term from U.S. Special Operations that General Petraeus stole in 2006. And accountability is difficult, if not impossible, to maintain. So, with that being said, the authors state right under the program evaluation design section, given the time constraints placed on this evaluation, the focus was on product evaluation, but where possible and necessary, we included the broader evaluative framework. They also go on to say, where possible and necessary, we included the broader evaluative framework of content, inputs, process, and products, focusing on context, inputs, process, and products, ensures depth as well as breadth given the diverse collection methods. They never say what the collection methods are. There is just a very convoluted statement there that covers up the fact that essentially there is absent of a design methodology in place. Going back to what seems to be years ago, it was mentioned in week 7 during the process evaluation lectures, courtesy of Dr. Beard. I'm sorry, I don't think he ever actually introduced himself, but he's the only male instructor that we've had on videos thus far. But he said, the evaluation of a process and ultimately a program has 2 primary objectives. Number 1 is a program reaching its target population, and number 2, are the service and support deliverables consistent with program design specifications? Accountability is key, and to sit there and take a whimsical approach to it, as had been mentioned by Charles, and you'll see what GP puts things at risk. I'm going to turn it over to GP here, but I want to leave you with this quote, proper planning prevents poor performance. Rangers lead the way.
Inclusivity Action Plan, IAP for the York region. Methods. The methods used were document reviews, interviews, focus groups, and surveys. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the concerning issues on this action plan. The document reviews were heavily dependent on program workers' data and not the community, which was the intended audience. Now, that in itself is an issue because if you want to find out what's going on, you've got to talk to the right audience, the target audience, and part of the survey. And finally, the response rates were very low. Out of the 119 people who took the survey, only 35 participated or answered. None of the community stakeholders provided information, and also none of the 10 open-ended survey questions of the Blue Sky Retreat, which is where they got the majority of their information, was even returned. Here, both quantitative and qualitative shortcomings occurred in this study. Let's talk about them. First, a major shortcoming was not following through with getting the information from the target audience. Over and over, the author describes the intent of the study, only to not follow through with the intent. The shortcoming that we found were the way the questions were developed. The author made answers from existing documents priority, but failed to explain what questions drove the data they were collecting. So, what is it that we're looking for at the end of the day? What documents do we need? We need to describe which ones they are, specifically, and why.
Okay, so our recommendations at the end of this, we're going to be honest here. The report does acknowledge its overall weakness in the amount of time preventing scheduling of sufficient interviews. Their responses on the surveys were moderate, and it should be noted that since the time of this report, the HSPC has followed a program of regular yearly reviews. But relative to specifically this report from 2007, if we're going to look at the recommendations, the first is that the results of the plan should be distributed to the local community by means of some sort of town hall type forums. The overall impact needs to be evaluated at the level of the service providers and the overall inclusivity, but because the intent of the program is to impact the recipients, they need to be in the loop. This report at no point actually interviewed or questioned any of the people who received the services. Therefore, they're missing that big piece of data and inclusion on it for an inclusivity action plan. So the results should be pushed down so that they could get that feedback back from the community. And then, of course, the quality of the evaluations would be greatly improved if they had a greater length of time to conduct the review itself and allow for sufficient interviews. Then the review should also include the individuals who are receiving the services. They should be directly interviewed and surveyed, just as the participants of the program were, to see if the program is actually having any real impact to the intended audience.